Even within one given team, there are maybe multiple developers, but there are now too many interdependent components.
Absolutely.
Today's application
Absolutely.
infrastructure, there's a connection between your resilience and the performance throughput and the security considerations and the networking considerations and then the application architecture. They're all interrelated now, and that's definitely one of the big problems,
right.
the challenges that we're seeing people trying to wrestle with. And you talk about the need to have that foundation of knowledge. In your experience, where is that today? Where is that knowledge currently stored? I mean,
it's some kind of repository. Okay, the most
is it in a repository or is it?
Today?
Yeah.
You mean today? In most enterprises, yeah. It's what we call tribal knowledge.
Right. Yes.
Okay, it's in the mind of people. 40 years ago, it was in my mind when you were talking about restarting the turbines in that nuclear power plant,
sure.
which I reassure you is not in service anymore.
Okay.
But it never failed.
I trust your coding. It's okay. I wouldn't have minded if it was.
But everything that was around that piece of software was in my head.
Yeah.
The software engineers are notoriously terrible when it comes to documenting what they do.
Sure.
And once they have documented, they will change again and not document the changes.
Yeah.
So it's a world that is totally unreliable and entirely in the head of people. So in many organizations, what you find is that there are alpha dozen gurus who know everything. They've been around for 20 years, 25 years. They know everybody in the business. They are the experts on network, on mainframe, on servers, on databases, etc. And that's how the world works.
Yeah.
The problem is that when you get into gigantic organizations, with a lot of moving parts, with a lot of hosting externally, with sometimes outsourcing, all that breaks apart. Nothing works anymore because that knowledge, that tribal knowledge, cannot be transmissible. Okay.
So there are two things that makes me think of. First of all, it's not, of course, just software engineers who've got that knowledge in their heads. These days, of course, it's all the engineers covering all the different parts of the environment. It's the database engineers, it's the load balancing specialists, and of course, it's all the application specific engineers. So they've all got that knowledge. And the other thing that I've seen, time and again, I've heard, interesting stories about little tribes who become extremely defensive about the knowledge that they have in their own heads and in their own systems, because they know full well that actually that's part of their protection within their organization, part of their value. Now, of course, on an individual basis, one can understand that, and everybody's entitled to have, their value within their organization. However, from a business's perspective, that's another risk. That's another risk because you're not. That's something that's institutional knowledge that hasn't been automated or institutionalized. It's out there with individuals.
Right. Yeah. And if you lose the individual, you're losing the knowledge.
Either exactly. Either if you lose the individual because they choose to leave, which is a risk, or indeed you need to recalibrate or configure the organization, and that individual, you can't afford to have the individual around anymore. That's another form of risk.
Yeah.
So I've definitely seen that in a number of instances. So if we go back, if we accept then that this knowledge base that's currently resides in many different people's heads and their own custom-built sort of solutions in different parts of this organization, this multifaceted, multi-siloed sort of application infrastructure organization, and we need to build that knowledge base, but we're also in a situation I've often find where the scrutiny that the business is placing on projects delivered by IT for the business is extremely hard. It's extremely harsh, if you will. So it's, when is the payback? Where are the success criteria? Is this a good ROI for the business and so on? And I think we're all come to accept that. The reality also is that the scrutiny that the business places on projects, not for the business, but for IT, is even greater. Mm-hmm. So we see a great need when we're working with our customers and our prospects to be able to come up with projects that can be successful within 3 months. something that can positively influence, a department or an individual's bonus, within the 6 month or the annual kind of cycle. And that'll only happen if you can show evidence to the business that this project you were undertaking on IT's behalf really delivered something. So that's something that we've seen. So what is your experience of talking to the clients about those different projects that people are getting their teeth into, ITIL projects, CMDB projects, BSM and application dependency mapping projects?
Well, you're absolutely right in the sense that one of the recommendations I give to my clients is whatever you do, provide results every 3 months.
Sure, okay? Absolutely.
Keep the interest going, keep the juices
piece
flowing.
By piece,
okay,
slice
piece by piece. And of course, you cannot say, if you take an ITIL project, for example, it's going to take most probably over a year or more. Okay, depending on the size of the organization, the number of people you have to convince, the papers you have to write, etc.